This is the Rattle and Hum Sports Podcast for Sunday, November 10th. And I'm Bryan Houston. Thanks very much for joining us. Dallas Cowboys get destroyed tonight by the New Orleans Saints, 49-17. And with us right now to cuss and discuss one of the most disgusting performances that we've seen in quite a while, Matthew Postins covering Cowboys for Rattle and Hum Sports. Matthew, I mean, where do you start with a mess like this? 0 for 8 on third down conversions, over 600 yards given up on offense. I mean, it was just brutal.
It was a very brutal game for Cowboys fans and everybody that had to cover it. This was complete domination in every sense of the word on the New Orleans side. From the second quarter on, the Saints had the Cowboys number. And it's kind of hard to believe that at one point in this game, the Cowboys actually had a 3-point lead. They were actually up 10-7. But then Sean Lee got hurt, and I don't necessarily think that Sean Lee getting hurt had, a significant factor, because I think the Saints probably would have run over the Cowboys anyway. But that seemed to be the first nail in the coffin, so to speak, in this game.
You don't think it made that big a difference, huh?
Well, the way the Saints played tonight, I'm not sure anybody could have stopped them. They were as efficient as I've ever seen them. I mean, Drew Brees had 7 incompletions. He threw 4 touchdown passes. He nearly became the 5th quarterback to throw for 400 yards against the Cowboys this season. Mark Ingram had a huge night, rushed for 145 yards. Pierre Thomas rushed for another 87. I mean, it's not just that the Saints seemingly scored at will, is that they adopted the game plan that really and truly the Cowboys should have adopted, which was drive the ball the length of the field, run the football consistently, chew up clock, and the Saints possessed the ball for nearly 40 minutes in this game, and they still scored 49 points.
As bad as the defense was, you can understand that, because the Cowboys are basically playing with an entire lineup of practice squad players on defense. Explain to me what in the world happened to the offense tonight.
Well, I think that was Rob Ryan. I think that was Rob Ryan saying, hey, I know you better than you know yourselves. And you know what? He was right. He downplayed the whole Jerry fired me thing throughout the week and said all the right things. But I think that Sunday night was all about him proving to everyone that the Cowboys made a mistake in firing him. They did a tremendous job. They didn't do a great job stopping the run in this game. It was actually the one thing they had a problem with. DeMarco Murray had a nice game, 16 carries, 89 yards. But in terms of the passing game, they bracketed coverage on Dez Bryant. They pretty much blanketed him with a cornerback and a safety. They were physical with him on the line of scrimmage. And if you remember from the Saints game last year when they played each other, the Saints were not physical with Dez Bryant. They played off of him, and they paid for it dearly. Bryant had one of the best games of his career against the Saints that day. This time they were physical. They didn't give him any breathing room. I mean, he ended up with 1 catch for 44 yards, and a lot of that had to do with the way the Saints played him. And, without Bryant to go to, Jason Witten couldn't win enough battles in single coverage. Tony Romo was under duress for a good portion of the evening. And I don't think the Saints had that many sacks in this game. I take that back. They had 3 sacks in this game, but Romo was under a lot more pressure than I think the Cowboys expected him to be tonight.
Yeah, I would think so, because nobody expected. I mean, the Saints defense has not been putting up big-time numbers this year under Rob Ryan. It's not like it's been the 85 Bears. I mean, I realize they're improved, but there was nothing special about this defense coming into this ball game.
Well, I think you look at them from a yardage standpoint. They were in the top 10 certainly, but they weren't creating a lot of turnovers, and they were coming off of a stretch where they had lost 2 of their last 3 games. The Jets kind of did a number on them offensively. I mean, not to the extent that the Saints put a number on the Cowboys tonight, but the Jets kind of took advantages of things defensively, and I think with the Saints coming into this game, they really wanted to shore up the pass defense, because they knew that if they were going to get beat, it was going to be because of Tony Romo and Dez Bryant, and they took away a lot of what the Cowboys do best in this contest. I mean, if DeMarco Murray could have had 300 yards rushing in this game, I'm not sure it would have been enough. frankly, for the Cowboys to even be within 10 points of the Saints tonight.
I think you might be right about that. If there was a real turning point to this ball game, I thought it came when the Saints had the 21-10 lead. Sproles had just scored. The Saints had just driven 52 yards, and they had scored with 1:37 to go. Cowboys go 3 and out, and they give the Saints the ball back with about 50 seconds to go in the first half, and the Saints go down the field like they were playing against air and score a touchdown with 13 seconds to go, and it's 28-10. And if there was any chance of the Cowboys staying in the game, it ended right there.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what's really distressing is that it was 2nd and 2 from the Cowboys' 28 when they failed to convert 2 straight passes from Romo, 1 to Terrence Williams, 1 to Cole Beasley, both in short field. Neither one of them completed. And then they had to punt it away. And Chris Jones had a nice punt, 47 yards, pinned the Saints back on the 25-yard line. But Drew Brees led the Saints down the field in 40 seconds on that scoring drive. 40 seconds. Short pass to to Graham, short pass to Sproles, another short pass to Sproles, a 19-yard pass to Colston, then an incompletion, believe it or not. And I think that might have been the incompletion that snapped his 19-pass completion streak, and then the 28-yard touchdown pass to Sproles.
Now, the last time the Cowboys lost a ball game like this, I know there probably have been worse losses, but it just immediately comes to mind the last time the Cowboys were brutalized like this on national television. Jerry Jones fired a head coach.
Yeah, that would have been the Green Bay game when they fired Wade Phillips the next day. I don't anticipate Jason Garrett getting fired tomorrow.
No.
Especially with the bye week and especially with so many injuries on this team. I mean, it's really hard to sit there and find enough justification to fire Garrett yet. But I actually just finished writing my 1st and 10 for Rattle and Hum, which is my review of the game, and I'm having difficulty seeing this Cowboys team, doing any better than 8-8 this year. And the way the schedule shakes out the last 6 weeks, if Lee's injury is significant, if Justin Durant's injury is significant, both of them have hamstring injuries now. I could see the Cowboys finishing worse than 8-8. It's very troubling the way they played tonight. You can find some excuses on defense and find some reasons why it happened, but offensively, it's really hard to see why the Cowboys were only able to put up 17 points, on the Saints. The Saints obviously did a great job defensively, but the Cowboys, should have been in this game. And you could even look at the onside kick. They had the onside kick in the third quarter. They had an opportunity to cut it down to 9, 10, 11 points at that point, and they went 3 and out again. There's no consistency in this football team in any way, shape, or form right now.
I totally agree. The thing with the offense, it's just inexplicable to me that and I know automatically I'm going to hear 5 billion Romo haters putting it all on him. One, they didn't have the ball, but when they did have the ball, they did basically nothing with it. Oh, well, they did run the football tonight, but no, they didn't target Dez at all in the first half. In fact, Dez caught one grand pass when the ball game was well over for 44 yards. The offense looked like it was playing with practice squad players tonight, and they had everybody healthy but Miles Austin.
Yeah, it's funny. They finally got the one pass to Dez, and it was because they moved him into the slot on that particular play. And that seemed to help because I think he was playing a safety in that particular situation instead of a corner, and they actually played single coverage on him in that particular play. I think what teams have learned about Dez Bryant now over the past few weeks is that if you're really physical with him at the line of scrimmage and you roll over safeties quickly to blanket him in coverage once the corner has been physical with him, you can really disrupt what he wants to do on the field. And now that I think there's enough body of work there in the past few weeks for the Cowboys to realize what teams are trying to do to him, it's now incumbent upon Bryant and the Cowboys to adjust to that. I always like to say that the NFL figures you out. At some point, the NFL figures out how to stop you. It happened to Tim Tebow. It happened to the Wildcat. It happened to, flavors of the month throughout the NFL. And I'm not saying that Dez Bryant is a flavor of the month, but everybody in the NFL gets figured out at some point. defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator figures out what you do best, and they take it away from you. And now it's incumbent upon Des Bryant and Bill Callahan and Jason Garrett and the rest of that offensive brain trust to find ways to get Des Bryant the football, even though teams are being physical with him at the line of scrimmage, and even though teams are double teaming him. And maybe moving him into the slot occasionally is a first step in trying to find some adjustments to get him the football.
And when you said the words offensive brain trust, that's almost laughable.
It's a very, I've always felt like the offensive framework in Dallas is very vanilla. It's funny. Pro Football Reference is a site I go to frequently to, write some of the stories that I write at Rattle and Hum Sports, especially the ones that are statistically based. And for every year the Cowboys have been in existence, they have a web page for that particular year, and it lists the offense and the primary offensive and defensive formation that the team used that year. And right now they list Air Coryell as the offensive framework for the Dallas Cowboys. And this does not, to me, in any way resemble the Air Coryell offense that I grew up on in the 80s.
No. I mean, now, they throw the ball a lot, but they're not unstoppable. I mean, the Air Coryell was unstoppable.
Yeah, and I just feel like some of the formations they use are just stale, and they don't really seem to yield what you would hope in certain situations. It seems like I see the same formations over and over again. And if you're going to use the same formations over and over again, that's fine. But then it comes down to execution, and the Cowboys are not executing consistently to back that up.
And then I have to go back to what I go back to every time, because Jason Garrett is going to be made to be the fall guy in this thing. And it was Jerry Jones who decided to take the play calling out of his hands and put it in Bill Callahan's, possession. And I don't know that it's gotten better. It may have gotten worse.
Yeah, and it was also Jerry Jones's decision to go to this quote-unquote 12 offense, the one back, two tight end set that really just hasn't yielded anything for this team this season. James Hanna has become the number 2 tight end, but he's really a better blocker than he is a receiver at this point. Gavin Escobar has given the Cowboys nothing in terms of pass catching ability. This is what happens when you change your philosophy from year to year in the NFL. If there's something that if you don't pin yourself on something or don't have something that you believe in from a football philosophy standpoint, then you're left in the weeds every single year. And that's kind of where the Cowboys are right now. Jason Garrett may have things that he believes in as a coach, but I'm not 100% sure that he gets to impose that upon his team, because he has an owner who really is more interested in trying to find that one thing that works. And this year he rejiggered everything. He rejiggered the defense, he rejiggered the offense, and right now, at 10 games into the season, we're looking at exactly the same record the Cowboys had 10 games into last season.
The big difference, though, and I know you love him, but Monty Kiffin's defense is on pace right now to become one of the worst defenses in the history of the NFL. The second time they've given up over 600 yards in offense. They did it against Detroit. They gave up 626 tonight. 40 first downs, an NFL record. I mean, this is historic.
It's historically bad. And
yes.
It's not at all what I expected from this defense. I mean, I didn't necessarily think they were going to be a top 10 unit this year, just because I didn't think they had the depth at certain positions to make that happen, specifically defensive line, and that's really bearing. It's really bearing right now when you look at the way the defensive line is right now. I mean, they've played 16 different defensive linemen this year. That's just ridiculous. I mean, it's like, baseball, if you have 20 pitchers that you use during a particular year in your pitching staff, it's just insane.
Can I go back to one thing while you said that? They played what? How many? 16 different defensive linemen this year?
16 different defensive linemen this year.
And how many did they draft this year?
None.
Thank you. That's my point. That is my point. That is absolute insanity.
Yeah, I mean, the Cowboys really pinned their front four on their veteran guys this year. And tonight, only one of them was in the lineup, and that was Demarcus Ware. For the three weeks before that, the only other one in the lineup was Jason Hatcher. And then, of course, we all know where Jay Ratliff is. He's up in Chicago. And Anthony Spencer's done for the year. The Cowboys really pinned their hopes in their front four on those four veteran guys being healthy and ready to go. And that put them behind the eight ball from the very beginning because they didn't have a contingency plan in case any of those guys were unable to go. And if you believe everything about Jay Ratliff that has been said, it's hard for me to believe that the Cowboys wouldn't have looked at that situation and said to themselves, you know what, maybe we do need to draft a Sheriff Floyd in the first round instead of trading down to take a center.
Or drafting a tight end in Escobar that they really didn't need at that point.
Exactly, especially the way the 12 formations played out for them.
All right, and then again, we saw Lee leave tonight, and it looked bad. It looks like the kind of injury that may keep him out for the rest of the year. We don't have any idea, but it sure looked awful. He couldn't walk on it with the hamstring. And then we saw Ware re-injure his leg and play basically on one leg for most of the second half. So, I mean, where do we go from here?
Well, I mean, the only bit of good news really is that they get 2 weeks to rest. So, Sean Lee will get a little time to rest, and Demarcus Ware will get a little time to rest. I'm encouraged by the fact that Ware was at least able to continue to play. That means that if he did re-aggravate the injury, he didn't re-aggravate it too much. So maybe a couple of weeks of rest does him good before they go up to the Meadowlands to face the Giants. As for Lee, I don't want to speculate on how bad the injury is, but you're getting to the point in the season where you have to look at, when you're going to get a guy back as opposed to the end of the season. That's why a guy like Brian Waters was put on the IR a couple weeks ago, because even though he might have been able to make it back by week 16 or week 17, you really can't have your roster spot eaten up for 8 weeks by a guy that won't play. So, Lee's availability is really going to be contingent on how quickly he can recover from this. And, the rash of hamstring injuries in this team, you got to wonder if the Cowboys need to examine that because they had the same issue last year. And, Lee's the type of player they have to keep healthy, especially for the money they're going to be paying him over the next 4 or 5 years. But you have Austin out with a hamstring, Justin Durant has a hamstring, Sean Lee has a hamstring, Lance Dunbar had a hamstring issue earlier this year. There's a real hamstring problem in Valley Range right now, and you have to wonder if the Cowboys need to re-examine something that might keep these players a little bit healthier in that regard.
And then as we wrap up here, let's talk about it from an NFC East perspective. As the Cowboys go completely into the toilet tonight, the Philadelphia Eagles and Nick Foles are on a streak now, and they beat Green Bay. Granted, Green Bay was without a quarterback today, but Nick Foles seems like he's really coming into his own now with Chip Kelly's offense.
He really does, and I think that whole team is kind of rounding into shape now. They had a little valley there a few weeks ago, and now you're seeing they're moving the football consistently, especially through the air. Deshaun Jackson's having a great year. Chip Kelly really seems to be using his offensive tools effectively. They're scoring quickly, like I think everybody expected them to, but the defense is finally beginning to move into a position where it can hold its own. Where I think a month ago, I don't think you could have said that. So if you're talking about teams and kind of where they are, moving up or moving down, I would say the Eagles are the ones moving up right now because it seems like they're starting to peak, at the right time in the season. And maybe the Cowboys, moving down a little bit going into the bye. And if you look at their schedule, like I said, Oakland seems like the only game I look at it as a winnable. As a game I would say is a lead pipe lock win, and even then it probably isn't the way this team's playing right now. I just kind of feel like things are setting up a little bit better for the Eagles than they are for the Cowboys. And, you can look at what the Cowboys have done this season, losing 3 games by a combined 14, or 4 games by a combined 14 points before getting drilled by the Saints tonight. If some of those games had gone their way, it really wouldn't have mattered what happened in this game. They'd still have a 1 or 2 game lead in the division.
Now, just a hypothetical as we get ready to close here. When we talked several weeks ago, we looked at the schedule, and I think you agreed with me when I said I didn't think there was any way that the Cowboys would beat the Saints. But the way they lost tonight, what kind of long-term impact does that have on this football team, as opposed to had they lost and been competitive?
I think the best thing is that they have the bye. They get 2 weeks to forget about it. I don't think they're going to really dwell on this too much, because I think most of them, to a man in the locker room, is going to say, Mama said there'd be days like this. Every once in a while, you're going to get absolutely hammered in the NFL, even if you're the best team in the league. So to me, I think this is actually going to serve as a bit of motivation for them before they go into the Giants game in 2 weeks, just because they're going to want to try and prove that that's not the kind of team that they are. Whether that means they beat the Giants or not, I'm not certain, but I don't think it's going to have a huge long-term damage on this team's psyche, unless they're going to be missing a guy like a Sean Lee for several weeks. Then I think you could have a potential problem from a psyche standpoint, and a potential problem from a game plan standpoint, because now Ernie Sims is your middle linebacker, and I'm not sure that's good enough long term for this football team.
Well, as Brad Sham put it tonight, he said no pressure and no coverage, and I'll throw in no offense, and that's a recipe for disaster.
Pretty much.
Yep, and the Cowboys lose one in completely embarrassing fashion tonight. By a score of 49-17, and they get to stew on it for 2 weeks before they get ready for the New York Giants on November the 24th. And by that time, as I've read in several places, they could be out of first place in the NFC East. Really depressing night tonight for Cowboy fans.
Yeah, not going to be a fun day at work on Monday morning. If you have the ability to take the day off, this might not be a bad day to do it.
Just roll over and pull the covers over your head.
Exactly.
Okay. Matthew, what's coming up this week on Rattle and Hum Sports?
Well, obviously, 1st and 10 will be up on the site tomorrow morning along with this podcast. We'll get you up to date as much as we can on injuries. My assumption is Jason Garrett will speak to the media on Monday, and then the Cowboys will go dark for the rest of the week. With the bye week, the Cowboys players will get some time to, rest and relax a little bit, kind of clear their head. And then, we'll keep up with things as they warrant, but Cowboys fans, sit back, relax, take a week off. You deserve it, especially after last night.
Yeah, exactly. When you're trying to figure out how you're going to get that 4 hours of your life back, you do deserve a break. All right, Matthew, thanks very much as always.
All right, thanks, Brian.
Matthew Postins from Rattle and Hum Sports. I'm Bryan Houston. This is a Rattle and Hum Sports podcast. Thanks very much for listening. Have a great one, and we'll talk to you next time.